Well, good afternoon everyone and welcome to today's webinar on cloud computing. My name is Christine Hallam and I'm the Events and Membership Coordinator at Connecting Up. Today's webinar is brought to you by Connecting Up, Microsoft Citizenship and TechSoup Asia. And Connecting Up is the organization that brings you TechSoup Asia program, donation and discount program. So I welcome to all of you from the Asia Pacific region. With me today I have Bruno Maluto from Voita Partners, who will be your presenter today, and also Laura Bales, who runs the Regional Communication in Asia Pacific for Microsoft Citizenship team. Before I pass it on to Laura to do a quick introduction, just a couple of housekeeping notes for those of you who are new to our webinar. We will not be taking any verbal questions, so if you do have anything you would like to ask during the webinar, please feel free to type them in the question box on your webinar platform, and we will address them as we go along and towards the end of the presentation as well. And if you have any concern about sound or anything, please just again type them in the question box and we'll try to address those issues. We are recording the webinar, so you will all get a link to the recording afterwards so you can catch up at your own leisure. So without further ado, I'd now like to introduce to Laura. As I mentioned, she runs the Regional Communication in APAC for Microsoft Citizenship, to say a few words. Laura, over to you.
Thanks, Christine. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us for today's webinar, and also want to especially thank Connecting Up as our partner and for hosting this call. We really appreciate your work and partnership. Today's webinar is part of a broader Microsoft Citizenship program through which we provide capacity building support for the nonprofit sector. We offer software donations, host in-country nonprofit conferences. We offer webinars, organize classroom training, and hold executive director roundtable discussions on technology. And each month we produce an e-newsletter called Tech for Good, which highlights stories about nonprofits and their use of technology. And after today's webinar, you will receive a copy of our e-newsletter, and we encourage you to subscribe so that you can find out about future webinars, training sessions, and conferences that we offer throughout Asia Pacific, as well as how other nonprofit organizations use technology. So thanks again for joining us today. We hope you enjoy the session. Thanks, Christine.
Thanks, Laura. Before I pass you on to Bruno, just a quick introduction. So Bruno is the director and owner of Voita Partners, and he has extensive skills and experience in IT, service delivery, and process improvement. And he has helped a lot of organizations with offering support in terms of a range of technology strategies and issues, and also to do with the cloud. Obviously, that's what he's here for. So I'd like now to pass on the presentation to Bruno to begin. Bruno, are you there?
Yes.
Over to you.
Thanks, Christina, and good afternoon, everyone. So let's get started on our webinar here, looking at some of the ways to approach cloud adoption. So the main target that we're interested in addressing this webinar to is really business managers, influencers or decision makers within your organisation. Also, if you're an IT professional, you'll find this webinar beneficial because it will help you position the discussion of cloud services at a business level within your organisation and help you to be able to answer and talk confidently to your executive and leadership about some of the considerations specific for the not-for-profit sector. Again, with the idea that you make a really successful step into cloud services and successful investment in that space. So what is it reasonable for you to expect to get out of our session this afternoon? Well, what we're going to cover is give you just some very plain language ways to describe and understand the world of cloud services, the benefits and the opportunities that cloud present are sort of very highly publicised. We're going to look at a couple of those benefits and see how they can apply to you within the not-for-profit space. And we're also going to discuss some of the things to think about, some of the questions that you need to ask to some of your vendors or providers, again, within the context of making a really successful decision to adopt cloud, a really successful method of entry into that space. And then we're going to wrap up by looking at some really low-risk, simple ways of getting started. And we're going to use the Office 365 offering from Microsoft as a bit of a scenario to talk through how you can start to get into that space if it's something that's of relevance for your organisation. So, what is a cloud service? Well, there are three very basic characteristics that make up a cloud service. And in business terms, they are that cloud services are accessed over the internet. So that means the implication of that is you can start to access cloud services not just when you're sitting in your office, but from a number of different devices. That has potential benefits. Cloud services can also be scaled very quickly. So you can order them and you can change the amount of service you're using quite rapidly. And you are paying for your service as you go. So that subscription model isn't just a yearly license fee divided by 12. What that pay-as-you-go aspect of cloud services is that let's, for example, say you're not-for-profit organisation is something maybe around a festival type of space, trying to organise annual events. You may go for a large part of the year with just a skeleton crew of maybe 5 or 6 people, but then as you start to lead into your festival time, preparing for those events, you may scale up to 40, 50 personnel or more. The benefit of a cloud service is it lets you control your cost, or it lets you match your cost to the actual activity you're doing and the potential revenue you can earn. So they're the three basic characteristics: accessed over the internet, service can be ordered and changed rapidly, and you pay as you go. Now, what you'll hear when you talk about, or you hear discussion about cloud services, you'll hear a number of terms raised, and a lot of the terms used, such as public cloud, private cloud, or this hybrid or stratified cloud environment where you see private and public, really are referring to the cloud deployment models. And you may have some enthusiastic IT people within your organisation that say, well, we kind of have almost a private cloud ourselves with what we've got. Sadly, that's not the case. There's more to a private cloud than just running a virtual machine on a server. There's very, very few organisations that will actually have the scale to warrant a true private cloud. For most not-for-profits around the world, the public cloud environment is something that will be the most appropriate fit for you. And the reason why I'm raising this is that it does create a bit of a context of which of your current business services that you may run in-house are going to be the best fit to put out into the cloud environment. Terms you also hear discussed quite frequently are these three key layers of cloud services. So the software as a service, the platform as a service, the infrastructure as a service. Now, making sense of it all, you can map those three cloud services back to what you traditionally would do today. So let's say today most organisations need to run some kind of exchange or messaging platform, be that Microsoft Exchange, they may run business systems, and typically you'd have to go out and purchase the software, you'd have to purchase the servers or the infrastructure that software runs on, and you may need to run some kind of additional, beyond the operating system, some kind of additional software layers there. What happens in the cloud environment is that now these cloud services mean it becomes a lot simpler for you to be able to deliver the same business outcomes. So here in the software as a service layer, again, it's going to be at this level here that most not-for-profits and many organisations will be playing at or will be using. And typical examples of that are, instead of going now and buying licensing and software and servers, people can start to subscribe or make use of a service such as Office 365, Exchange Online, or many other variations there. The platform and the infrastructure service, again, if you're a very large organisation and you have very specific IT requirements, there are a number of different providers there. Obviously, Microsoft is one of the leading ones, and many other solution providers in that space as well. So the result is that today, most organisations that are running some kind of cloud environment, their logical environment looks a little bit like this, where it really is a bit of a hybrid. So when you think about cloud as a business person or as a business manager, the discussion doesn't have to be about all or nothing. The reality is that most organisations and most not-for-profits will run a bit of a mixed environment where some services or some things will be managed or deployed internally. So they may be some kind of business system, such as your finance system. There may be some very specific line of business application to your business. You may choose to keep that internally. But what we see happening more and more is that things that are defined as a true utility type of service, in other words, there's nothing specialised about it, regardless of whether you're a not-for-profit or a retail environment or even an IT shop, you still need to send email. That messaging and collaboration is a service that we're seeing more and more consumed out of the cloud environment. In time, and depending on the size of your organisation, even something like file serving, where you store your documents and how you access them, that's something that we're seeing migrating more and more into a cloud environment. And as we sort of look at the Office 365 offering a little bit towards the end of our session, you'll see that based on the size of your organisation and the details of what you keep in terms of data, that may be a viable option for you as well. So now that we've covered a little bit about what cloud services look like, why should you consider seriously going down this path? What are some benefits that you can realistically expect to achieve out of this? Well, we're going to consider 3 examples briefly. They're going to range from a true enterprise organisation, a mid-tier one, and then we're also going to look at a lot of information about benefits that are coming from your peers in the not-for-profit sector around the world. The first example that we're going to quickly talk about is Commonwealth Bank. So that's one of Australia's largest financial institutions or banking organisations. And it's interesting that over the last 12 months, they've been able to achieve significant savings in how they run their investment in IT through the use of cloud services. Now, the reason why I'm highlighting these guys here is that it talks to one of the characteristics that we raised right at the start of our discussion about the ability to scale your investment, scale your consumption of services as you need it, and the dollar benefits that come because of that. So for Commonwealth Bank, they've decided to pretty much transition the bulk of their development and testing systems over to a cloud environment, and you can see there extremely compelling statistics there about the benefits that they've been able to achieve. Now, you might not be able to achieve the exact same savings yourself as a small not-for-profit, but it gives you an idea of what can be realised. The next example is one that's a little bit of a mid-sized organisation in comparison, and this is of a local government or the City of Melbourne, the council there. So they chose to migrate a very specific part of their IT services, particularly their web services, over to a cloud environment. And that was really triggered because of effectively a massive meltdown on one of their websites. So the City of Melbourne promote 4 basic festivals, or 4 major festivals, being Moomba, the Music Festival, New Year's, and Fashion Week. And I believe it was Moomba last year that got heavily promoted. Massive amounts of users hit the website, and the website effectively died, which, of course, really has a negative impact on an organisation's image, their ability to service their customers. So what the organisation did there was used a cloud service. The benefits that they now have from that is that they don't need to make massive capital investment all in one hit. predicting what they think user demand is going to be. What they're able to do is have their websites up, running in a dynamic environment, and based on user load, they can scale that environment to be able to satisfactorily handle it. They only pay for that increased resources as they use it. And so this one here, again, is something that may start to, the profile of that benefit may be something that may be relevant for your organisation. So again, if you're a not-for-profit, maybe that manages or runs some kind of festival, as I mentioned at the start, where you have very defined peaks and troughs in demand, a cloud service can be a way of starting to marry your costs so that they align to those peak periods. You may also be a not-for-profit that deals with very specific periods of the year where you focus on perhaps fundraising and donations. You may promote people to come to your website. You may have more people that are sitting perhaps in a call centre or accessing systems like CRM. Instead of making a massive investment at the start of the year and having a lot of user licenses or a lot of computer hardware that sits dormant for a long time, moving to a cloud service lets you scale that investment to the times when you're going to need it. So that's another very realistic benefit that you can expect to achieve. The next area that we're going to look at, or the next benefit, is really a result of a survey done in 2012, and this was a global survey that was driven by Connecting Up and TechSoup, and it was a global not-for-profit survey, and it was interesting to see what the benefits that your peers have experienced so far around the world. And the biggest thing that stood out for users, the top two, as you can see, were an improvement in the effort to administer IT systems, and the other one is obviously an improvement in costs. So certainly if you're a smaller not-for-profit, you might just have a handful of people. The ability to be able to get your services reliably, not have to worry about either being a part-time IT person that keeps the server running or having to pay external IT resources, that reduction in administrative effort, that ability to let you just focus on what your core business is, which is servicing the community, managing your funding streams, whatever it might be, that can be a very real benefit that your peers are starting to evidence today. So the examples we've briefly looked at there, again, just reiterating what we've talked about, some of the key things you can start to expect to see as benefits is the need for capital expenditure reduces. You're able to respond to changes in your organisation more rapidly. You can start to match your costs closely to your revenue or to your activity, and you get this reduction in administrative overhead. Now, these benefits may not all apply to your specific organisation. For example, this one here about rapidly responding to changing demand. If you're a not-for-profit that has a very stable group of employees as in headcount throughout the year, if you just deliver pretty much the same services, there's no peaks and troughs, that one may not be applicable to you. But you can still expect to realise some reduction in capital expenditure, some reduction in admin overhead through making the right choice about the type of cloud services you go to. So talking about the benefits of the easy part, I suppose, trying to analyse your own business and then make the decision to proceed onto a cloud service is a little bit tougher, and there's a few things beyond looking at the glossy sales brochures or the sales websites. There's a few things to think about that we'd like to try to raise during our webinar here, just so that you can make the best decision possible for your business or your organisation. So we'll start with a really obvious one, being connectivity. Now this shouldn't necessarily be a problem, but if your organisation does not have reliable access to the internet, then you should stop and pause and think, will it be successful if I adopt a cloud service? You may want to restrict what you put out to the cloud if you are in an environment where you do not have properly performing internet access. So you may choose to say, I might just put my Exchange server out there online, use that as a service, but I might keep anything that's really data intensive, you know, the transmission of documents or any other kind of more data intensive activity internally. This should be a lesser issue, but it's an obvious one up front that you want to think about, and that will shape what service you look at consuming. The other big thing that people naturally think about when it comes to a cloud service is this going to be secure? And the simple answer is yes, the cloud is secure. However, there are a few things you can do or that you can instruct your IT provider or your internal IT team to do to satisfy any queries you may have. So all of the leading cloud providers in the industry, and Microsoft are a great example, are extremely transparent, which means you can get almost any information you need to. So if you have the need to go and find out some specifics about the security standards in place, again, specifically here for Microsoft, if you search for the Microsoft Global Foundation Services, you'll come to a very clean entry point in the world of Microsoft that lets you see, you know, certification levels, their approach to security, so that you can satisfy yourself or satisfy if you need to talk to any external auditors or governance people about the safety of making a decision to put a service out to the cloud. For a lot of the services, for a lot of the software as a service, say for something again fairly straightforward like Exchange or some of the Office 365 offerings, this may be a no-brainer, the security element, but it's important to be aware as a consumer that it's not unreasonable for you to expect and receive full transparency, and Microsoft are a great example of providing that. For example, if you started to consider moving something that involved payment transactions to a cloud service that looked at the handling of people's payment details, you know, you're able to very quickly search in that Global Foundation site and find out what level of compliance the Microsoft Cloud Stack has against the payment card industry data security standards. So it's that level of transparency that it is reasonable for you to expect. If you were dealing with maybe a Tier 2 or an emerging cloud provider and they couldn't give you that kind of transparency, that would be maybe a warning flag that pops up that means you would need to investigate a little bit further or think more seriously about your decision in using that provider. Now, something closely related to security is the data that you are going to have housed outside your business, out in a cloud environment. And something to think about here is, and this will be different for each of you based on the type of organisation you're a part of, but if your not-for-profit deals regularly with some kind of government agency, be it state or Commonwealth, if you are reliant on government funding, if you are reliant on transacting information with a government department, you will need to inform yourself of what the government guidelines are for that department or for that entity on cloud services. And again, this will just help you make the right decision. So something like Exchange or email, the Office 365 suite, is fairly low risk. It may not be a drama. But again, if you were thinking of, if you were a much larger not-for-profit, if you were thinking of starting to deploy some of your line of business systems out into the cloud, this would be an area that you would need to stop, make sure you understand what your obligations are with your stakeholders, and really we would recommend start to undertake some analysis on classifying your data, understanding what data lives in what systems to help you make the right decision there. Another aspect, again, this is going to come down to the type of not-for-profit you are and who you deal with. But again, record keeping, and do you have any compliance requirements with record keeping standards? And again, the point here is just informing yourself, understanding what your obligations are so that you can make the right decision. And I should say, with each of these areas that we've talked about, the idea is here that as you approach a vendor or as you're assessing a solution, the vendor may not know all the answers, but it's important for you to raise these as questions you have and to make sure you have the right level of dialogue with your vendor so that you feel satisfied yourself, or if you need to report to executive, that yes, you're taking a considered and balanced decision there. So an important element to think about with cloud, and this comes to, again, it will be different for each organisation, is what's going to happen to my internal IT people, or what's going to happen to my support contract with the external IT provider. So just because you move a service from a more traditional model of being on premises or hosted out to a cloud doesn't mean that auto-magically, that's it. All you pay is X dollars per user per month. So if we think of the example of like an email or your exchange service being delivered via a cloud service, someone still needs to administer that. Someone still needs to create users. Someone still needs to create the appropriate security and profiles and business rules. So it's important to understand what the change will be on your IT department or your external IT provider. It may be very little if you're just taking a quite light or gentle move into the cloud space. If you're a very small not-for-profit and you're carrying the load yourself of a lot of IT administration as one of the team, it should reduce, because all you should now need to do is some very basic administration. All of the redundancy, the backups, all those good things come as part of your cloud service. If you're making a much more serious investment in cloud and you're moving a lot of your business systems to that environment, then this transition of your workforce, the change of what they're doing, is something that you need to sit down and build into your planning or into your business case. So an important thing with changes to how you procure services. So now you're looking at getting services from the cloud. It is important that you understand what rights do I have as a consumer, as the person paying the money? What levers or triggers do I have with my supplier to guarantee the appropriate level of service? So it is critical that you, again, understand what the service level agreements provided by the different vendors for the different services are. Now again, in this scenario, if we just stick with Microsoft as an example, again, their level of transparency is excellent. If any of you are used to working with the TechNet resource online, you can jump straight to Office 365 and have a very detailed level of information available to you about what the service contains, what the service level agreements are. There's service level agreements that are tailored for each region of the country. So again, they set a good benchmark of what you should expect from your cloud provider. But things to consider about are what's involved in getting onto the service beyond sort of the excitement of saying we're going to use cloud and it's $9.95 per user per month or whatever the rate may be. What's the mechanics involved in that? What's client's responsibility or your responsibility? What's going to be the responsibility of either the value-added reseller or the vendor? And then also you want to make sure that you understand what happens if for whatever reason you need to change your mind and you need to either change cloud provider or for whatever reason return to the traditional model. Now that's unlikely, but it's important to understand that up front so that you can at least make the appropriate plan and the appropriate decision making. So after considering all that information about what cloud services are in business terms, what are the benefits you can expect, what are some of the things you need to think about, how do you actually get started? Well, obviously, as you would naturally expect, and some of you may have experienced this, it is really very easy to get started. There's plenty of free trials, plenty of vendors offering you a gentle entry into this space, so it's not something that needs to be daunting. But let's use the Office 365 as an example of some of the things we've talked about today, and to help you sort of start to put those concepts into sort of a real-world example. So if we had to say, classify what type of service is Office 365, it's software as a service that you're going to subscribe to if you choose. The deployment model, it's going to be via a public cloud. So Microsoft's data centers here are, or for this region of the world, at the moment, Singapore and I believe a failover center in Hong Kong. But that space is constantly changing. There's continuing investment being made by a lot of the providers in very specific areas like Australia and other parts of the world. So that's constantly changing, and that has positive benefits for improvements in connectivity, improvements in the experience of using these services. What is the service offering of Office 365? Well, it's actually, there are 3 basic versions that Microsoft offer that is designed to scale to your organisation size. But I must say, as an independent person, if you read the solutions that are offered there, they are extremely feature-rich. So there is a lot you can do with just the very basic entry-level product. So what are the benefits, though, that it's reasonable for you to expect to get from something simple like, say, or an entry-level offering of, say, Office 365? It is reasonable for you to expect to get a reduction in your admin overhead. You shouldn't have to have a server on premises that's running Exchange, that's running, SharePoint or a website or something like that. There should be a reduction in that. You get a real improvement in the resilience of your organisation. So by that, what I mean is, if you have a standalone server sitting in your office somewhere, there are a lot of pieces that can fail and cause disruption to something as simple as email, which I'm sure if all of you would agree is becoming almost a mandatory essential service in today's world. When that goes off the air, people howl. So you get this improvement in resilience. You then get this real improved productivity from the solution. We think specifically of Office 365, this messaging, collaboration, intranet, file sharing related infrastructure. So they're the good things. What are some things to think about? Again, thinking about the context of what we've talked about in this presentation, that you need to talk to with your vendor to make sure that there's no hidden surprises or no unexpected frustration as you migrate into this kind of offering. So what you want to do is double check a few things. So you want to understand the details of your business, being what's the profile of my messaging platform or my Exchange server today. So what's the total size of the data store? How many mailboxes do I have? What's the basic size of those mailboxes? And the reason why it's important to understand those kind of details is because that's the charging structure that Microsoft will, or that Microsoft uses for consumption of the Office 365. So it's a fee per user per month, but there's also some limits on the size of data associated to each user. Now you can obviously have more, that incurs some different fees. So again, this is part of just building a comprehensive business case that you can make a good decision out of. Some more technically related aspects, and this is part of onboarding or transitioning into a cloud service. As a business, as a not-for-profit, you want to understand, well, what's my user experience going to be like? For example, will users still be able to just log into their laptops or PCs in the morning and then fire up their Outlook or whatever the tool is that you're using out there in the cloud? Will that be seamless, or will they need to log in again? To have that seamless user experience, are there any extra steps that need to be taken as part of transitioning? Those extra steps, is that something that there's a fee for? Is it something that you as a user need to do? Is it something that your value-added reseller or the vendor will do for you? The amount of data that's going to be migrated, is there going to be any additional cost for that? For this, you may, depending on the type of data connectivity you have, you may hit a spike of one-off fees if based on your plan. So again, it's important to try to build a bit of a comprehensive picture of what your business is like, what is it going to take to get that successfully transitioned into a cloud service. Again, so that there's no needless frustration there. Now, the example that we talked about with Office 365 is really a fairly gentle, fairly low-risk, high productivity scenario. There's a lot of positives that can come out of that for any organisation. If, however, you're planning to do something, even something like Office 365, but you're a large volume organisation, so let's say you sit more in the not-for-profit space that is large, bordering on enterprise, then you need to do a little bit more detailed homework by that. So that means that, again, your monthly fee will be larger than just 2 or 3 people in an office, or maybe 10 people going onto the cloud service. And you want to talk to your finance people in the organisation, make sure that they're comfortable that there's now going to be an increase in operating expenditure. In other words, every month they're going to see this new fee come along that they never had before. Now, it's not that you're paying more, it's just that the financial investment is going to be serviced by your company in a different way. And whether that's right or wrong for you is very much an internal discussion in your business. So it depends how your business works, and it's important to talk to your CFO or finance manager to make sure that a move like this will be something that's not going to cause needless anxiety or frustration for you financially. If you're going to move a large volume of your line of business systems or take a more aggressive approach into moving to cloud services, then again, it's understanding about the type of data, of where it's going to be housed. Are there any special requirements you have around satisfying record keeping or other government regulations? But really, regardless, as I sort of mentioned here towards the end, regardless of what level of cloud services you're interested in using, in today's world, because you no longer will be an early adopter if you're starting to do this, there's a lot of people who have come before you in this space, even in the not-for-profit sector. Ask your vendor, ask the salesperson you're dealing with, ask the value-added reseller for specific references of people you can talk to, really get a feel for what the good, the bad and the ugly was of their user experience. And really, with the emphasis being on, you don't want to repeat mistakes that other people have made. What are some simple things you can do to make the experience for your not-for-profit as successful as it can be? Well, folks, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. That sort of wraps up the sort of structured part of the presentation or the webinar from my side. If you have any questions or any other information, please feel free. I believe we'll discuss that now with Christine, or you're very welcome to shoot me an email should you desire.
Thanks, Bruno. We do have a couple of questions here, and as I mentioned earlier as well, please keep them coming. We do have a lot of time for Q&A, so I would just go through a couple that came through earlier. So Linda was asking, at what point is it beneficial for a not-for-profit to consider going from a public cloud to a private cloud?
That's a good question, Linda. So unless you're So the challenge with a private cloud is that there's very, very few, even enterprises, and regardless of what sector they work in, very few enterprises where it makes economic sense to invest not just in the hardware but in the smarts or the cloud software that lets a business achieve what a public cloud provider can do. So I would say migrating to a private cloud is not going to be something that will be on the horizon in the foreseeable, in the short to mid-term future. What may change that? So for example, today, I think CBIT's running, the CBIT conference is running in Sydney at the moment, and today I believe the Minister of Communications will be issuing, an update on the government's cloud policy and the steps of what the government's going to do, the Australian government that is, I should say, to start to build out their what's termed G Cloud or government cloud. So that's going to be a cloud specific for the government community. That in time may start to see other community type clouds where, you know, a cloud environment that's commissioned for not-for-profit sector, a cloud environment that's commissioned for something like a local government sector. Those things may start to come in the future. But I would say right now, for the foreseeable future, for the bulk of not-for-profits, you're going to be safe dealing with a hybrid environment of public cloud services and some things running in-house if you feel that you have some sensitive data requirements or other things you need to be doubly certain you can satisfy.
Thanks, Bruno. A question here from Theresa. She's basically saying that their website is hosted by a company who does programming work when required. How does this work if the website is hosted in the cloud?
Well, it really works the same way in that, when I say it works the same way, that's assuming that whoever the cloud service provider is has technology at the same standard or flavour that your developers can access, which I'll have to assume isn't going to be an issue or shouldn't be an issue. It really is going to be the same experience for the developers. They might have some slightly different tools or interfaces that they may work with to access your website code or your data. But you, as the person who's paying for that service, you'll still be paying your web developers to do their work. They'll still do their work and upload it via some interface. And all you're going to be getting charged from your cloud service provider, though, is, you know, the volume, the size of your website, the number of resources you're assigned to that website, be it in terms of memory, processes, things like that. So it's a very seamless change for your developers and for you. The big thing you should see out of a move of a website to the cloud service is a reduction in that capital expenditure. Your cost profile should start to change so that you have a very manageable month-to-month fee as opposed to a big investment up front for, say, a server, and then you depreciate that. And that doesn't matter whether the server's sitting in your premises or whether it's sitting out in a data center, as in traditionally hosted. You should see a reduction in the need for that capital expenditure. Sorry if I waffled on that answer, by the way, Teresa.
Great. We have a question from Margie. Margie is based in the Philippines, but she's just wondering, is cloud services purely for database management, or is it more than that?
No, it's so hi Margie. It's a lot more than just that. So you can access via cloud services pretty much the full range of business systems that you would use today traditionally in an on-premises model. So be that your email, your file sharing, your databases, applications like CRM, finance, HR, payroll. All of these types of services can be consumed via a cloud service, which means you don't have to have any physical infrastructure sitting inside your building or in the data center that you're paying for. So it's a lot more than just a database specific type of service or technology. It's very broad. I haven't touched on all of the social media, the Web 2 type things, services, you know, all those things obviously are delivered, you know, the Facebooks, the Twitters, you name it, all the things that you naturally probably deal with in your day-to-day life are all coming from a cloud provider. They're all a cloud service. You may not pay for that because of the model that they have to make their money, but it's all a cloud-based service that you're accessing.
Great. Caroline is asking, do you think it is okay for organizations to rely on cloud-based services like SkyDrive, I guess, for the files and stuff like that? Are these examples of public cloud?
So yes, so SkyDrive, that's a great question. So SkyDrive, I believe, is the Microsoft offering of effectively like your file sharing. You have a number of other versions available out there. Is it appropriate? I mean, in short, yes, it is. But what you need to do to make the best decision for your business is to understand what's the volume of data that you're talking about. So, if it's a few gig or a few hundred gig, then you want of documents and files that you're storing on your current network drives, then you want to do a bit of a analysis to say, well, what's that going to cost me if I need to get that as a cloud service? So the answer to that might say, yes, let's go ahead with that, or let's keep it in our current model of internal. The other thing for you to think about is, is there anything particularly sensitive data-wise that you store in your documentation? So, for example, you might have a line or a department of your business that deals with maybe contractual agreements, maybe specific personnel type data or data about a community member and their identity, and you need to think about or make the assessment of where when I put it out to a cloud service, where is that data going to be held? So it's not that the cloud service itself has security issues, because as we very briefly alluded to in the presentation, and there is a massive body of research and analysis. Cloud environments from the Tier 1 providers are extremely secure. The issue becomes more about where is that data physically sitting and what does that mean from a data sovereignty perspective. Now, this doesn't have to be an issue for every single customer. It's important for you, as I tried to allude to, who are your main stakeholders. If you're dealing with government departments and they represent your funding streams, and as part of your fulfilling your obligations to that funding stream and that government entity, you have to capture and manage a lot of sensitive data on their behalf. You want to just make an inquiry with them to say, look, we're thinking of making use of the cloud service to store our data. Is that okay with them, or are they sensitive about it? That is going to be something that will be different for each organisation, and it's purely you need to inform yourselves. I must say this area of data sovereignty is something that's evolving. Government's positions on it, their understanding of it, and even cloud providers' responses to commissioning data centres on different geographic areas. It is a space that's changing fairly rapidly, so you want to ask the question, keep yourself informed, seek some third-party advice if you're not sure about it.
We have one last question here. As I mentioned, we do have a fair bit of time, so if anyone else has the last burning questions, please send them through. But this question comes from Theresa. Does it make a difference if you have 40 staff or only 4 staff? Is it worth it for a small office?
Oh, well, look, I would say yes, it is. But I'm not one of the 4 workers. So when it's going to be, so let's use the example we talked about in our simple sort of scenario of Office 365. So if you do the research on what the entry-level offering is there, it offers you a lot beyond just sending an email and accessing Word documentation. There's a lot of, intranet, website, a lot of collaboration functionality that's available to you. If you had to go and purchase all of that for only a small group of people, I doubt you'd be able to get access to all of that in an affordable manner in a traditional model. So it certainly has huge potential, even if you're a small entity of just, a handful of people, half a dozen people. If as a half a dozen people, if a lot of you work from home or work virtually or you're on the road, one of the other pluses that a cloud-based service gives you is as long as you can get access to the internet, you can access that service, you can work collaboratively. So work and productivity doesn't have to stop just because you're not in the office. So it's definitely something that for a small organisation is potentially of huge benefit. Again, you need to sit down, look at the numbers, have a discussion with either the vendors. If you feel you need some third-party assistance, get the third-party assistance you need to just build the right business case for you. But definitely for small people, it gives you a huge step into a lot of automation, a lot of productivity benefits.
Great. It seems I haven't received any other questions, so I think this is a really eye-opener presentation where a lot of cloud has been in trend for a while, but everyone's still, I think, wondering what's the benefits, what's the risk. So it's just, I guess, the first step in understanding what it involves, obviously. So it's great that it's been very clear so far, Bruno. I will pass. There are particular probably questions that are specific on each organization's case, so I might just pass them on to those to you directly. But there's a question here again from Theresa. They've had some initial contact with vendors and some aren't willing to take on such a small organization. So what's your tips on that? Or what's your take on that?
Oh, yeah, sorry, I missed that question. So they've had some initial discussions with the vendor and...
Yep. And some are not willing to take on such a small organization because of the size.
Oh, okay. Well, try a different vendor, I suppose. But if you're and where's Theresa located? Is she?
She's based in Australia. Yeah, I think in Adelaide.
In Southeast Asia, in Australia. Okay.
Yeah, in Adelaide. Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay. Gosh, that's surprising. That's surprising, Theresa. I suppose without knowing exactly what you're trying to get online, but I know if you just do a search on Office 365 without sort of, saying that's the only option you have available to you, but if you just do a quick search on that, you'll be able to see that Microsoft have offerings for, from 0 up to 10 users, so your organisation sounds like it may fit into that category. You can get the cost for that. You may need to inquire if you're a not-for-profit about any discounted costs for the not-for-profit as opposed to just the standard rack rate. And if it's something, if the Microsoft path is something that suits your business needs, they should even be able to give you the contacts of reputable service providers or value-added resellers that can help you with some of the transition if there is anything complex you need to do, like configuring your domain details and any other integration that you may need to do. So it's surprising to hear that people weren't prepared to take you on. But the whole idea of cloud that's provided by the Tier 1 players is they have the service available there. It can scale to suit your needs. So I think don't be afraid to try another path. You're very welcome to drop me an email. I'm happy to shoot you some contacts or chat to you offline in a little bit more detail if that's of value. I mean, there's no cost from our side to do that, but if that helps you.
Great. Well, thank you. It seems like we don't have any other questions. Just before we close off, is there anything that you would like to add, Bruno?
No. Well, look, I'd say, well, firstly, thank you all for your time. And I think as Christine alluded to, this space may seem quite complex, but there's a few guiding principles that help simplify it all. I think if you can keep those guiding principles in mind, a lot of it comes down to understanding your business and what's unique about it or what's a little bit different about your business. So if your business scales throughout the year based on, you have a lot of employees and it drops down to a skeleton staff, that's going to be a bit of an indicator of what might be a good type of cloud service or a good benefit for you. If you have a fairly stable workforce, then that's going to help you assess other elements of the cloud service and where the benefits are going to come from you. The most important thing is really don't be afraid to ask questions. It's completely appropriate for you as consumers to demand transparency of your providers. And as we've tried to illustrate today by using the example of Microsoft as one of the Tier 1 providers, their level of transparency is extremely high. It's almost death by information. There's so much of it available. But really just, ask questions until you feel satisfied. And the whole reason why you would do a move to cloud is to benefit your business. If you're struggling to see that benefit, then for the moment, it's completely appropriate to just put the pause button on, keep observing what the industry is doing, and then you might find you get the right answers in a few months' time to make your decision, or in a year's time.
Thanks, Bruno. While we're talking about that, there was one question that came through from Royal. He's just basically asking, what are some cloud services that we might utilize as an organization that works towards community service? Do you have any recommendation?
Community service. Okay, so this is a good question, because I suppose what we've touched on today is more the internal or inward-looking elements of cloud. And what I mean by that is the productivity you can get just by your sort of back office type functions of the way you create documentation, the way you share that documentation amongst your co-workers, the way you handle messaging amongst your co-workers. In terms of community services, let's assume that, well, if you don't have a Web 2 type of website that allows for the dialogue and interaction between community members and your organisation, then cloud services is a way of enabling a web presence with that Web 2 level of functionality, and to do that in a way that doesn't incur additional capital expenditure or massive investment in servers or software or licensing. You can get that as part of your Office 365 package, for argument's sake. So that's one way of trying to increase your delivery of information and services to the community. Beyond that, without knowing a lot about your particular organisation, it's hard for me to give you a very definite answer, but you have your back office, your productivity improvements, you have the way you engage with the community and the tools you use to do that. And then it depends on your line of business systems and whether you are able to use them and your cloud services to start to deploy some of the apps, some of the other aspects of exchanging information in a more contemporary way. So it's a case of do some analysis, inform yourselves either with vendors if you're afraid of getting sales pressure, choose some external third-party players, and really try to just talk to your peers if possible. Or if you have specific questions and you need some access to some different links and online resources, feel free to shoot me an email and I'll gladly share as much as I have available to me.
Thanks, Bruno. Just before I close, Laura, do you have anything else you would like to add before we end the webinar?
Nothing else to add except for my thanks as well for everybody's time. And Bruno, thank you. That was a really great overview on benefits of going to the cloud. And to Christine and Connecting Up, thanks for the great partnership. I think this was a very well hour spent. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you. Well, once again, thank you everyone for joining us today online. Thank you for your questions, and we will be sending you the materials and the recording after the session, as well as the newsletter that Laura mentioned earlier from Microsoft Citizenship. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye.